There's a baby.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Commonwealth's Attorney Candidates, hosted by the Players Coalition. Thank you so much for coming. Players Coalition is an independent 501c3 and 501c4 advocacy group. Players across the country have come together to impact criminal justice reform, education and economic advancement, and police community relations. We're hosting district attorney and prosecutor forums across the country, including various cities in New York, Pennsylvania, and California. This forum is unique because we're taking a look at Northern Virginia and have invited candidates from both Arlington and Fairfax counties to participate. Hosting today is Chris Long, two-time Super Bowl champion, defensive end for the Philadelphia Eagles, the current Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year, and more importantly, a native Virginian and former All-American at the University of Virginia. Thank
you. So I pushed this once. Okay, I've got this figured out now. That's the hardest part. Thank you all so much for coming. More and more people are waking up to the fact that our criminal justice system is in serious need of reform. For far too long, tough on crime policies, under the guise of protecting citizens, have led to mass incarceration and mass supervision that have, more than anything else, they've led to a profound harmful effect to the most vulnerable people in our society, and in particular, our criminal justice system disproportionately impacts people of color and low-income people. And so we at the Players Coalition believe that the community as a whole is better served and protected through these new approaches to criminal justice. And we're working hard and we're committed toward making that a reality. One of the main areas that we focus on is prosecutors and prosecutor accountability. The prosecutor, more than perhaps any other government official, has the power to shape and change criminal justice policy. Let me back this up. Wow. But by using their discretion, prosecutors decide who gets charged, what they get charged with, and effectively what the person's sentence will be. But even with this tremendous power, prosecutors must still be responsible to the public. And that's where all of you have a big role to play. You get to choose who you want making these decisions. During the campaign process, it's really critical to hear from those vying for these positions as to how they will promise to use their power and discretion. And through discussions like these, which I'm very thankful that the candidates decided to join us, we can talk about the most important issues in Northern Virginia and what we can do to make our criminal justice system more fair and just for all Virginians. So. The way this is going to go is we'll present questions to panelists for discussion, and at the end we'll open it up for questions from the audience. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the questions. Actually, we're going to do 3 minutes for the opening statement, but in general, 90 seconds. I'll do my best to stay on top of that and keep it moving. And we'll also select questions from the audience. Over the first half hour, index cards and pens are at the end of each row. Please put any questions on the index card on your chair and pass them to the end of the row, where we'll collect them from throughout the evening, and we'll get to those later. So as I mentioned, this forum is unique because we've invited Democratic primary candidates from 2 jurisdictions, Arlington and Fairfax. We've invited Theo Stamos, incumbent Commonwealth's attorney in Arlington County, and Ray Moreau, incumbent Commonwealth's attorney in Fairfax, to be with us tonight, but obviously they declined to attend. And here with us today are the challengers for each office, for which I'm very thankful. Parisa Degani-Tafti, running for Commonwealth's attorney in Arlington, is the legal director at the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project, adjunct professor at Georgetown Law, and former staff attorney at the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia. Steve Descano, running for Commonwealth's attorney in Fairfax, worked as a federal prosecutor in the Justice Department after serving as a helicopter pilot in the U.S. Army, and since then, since 2006, has been COO and general counsel at Paragon Autism Services while continuing to serve on the Fairfax County Police Civilian Review Panel and other local boards and committees. So two very busy people vying for very important jobs. So thank you again for being here. Before getting into the questions, we will begin with short opening statements from each candidate, beginning with Ms. Degani Tafti. You each have, as I mentioned, 3 minutes. So you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Players Coalition. Thank you, Chris Long, for moderating. And thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. As Chris said, our criminal legal system needs real reform. And the question in these elections is, what does real reform look like here in Northern Virginia? Since federal prisoners constitute only 10% of the incarcerated population, local prosecutors bear the primary responsibility for the United States being the largest incarcerator in the world. And Virginia incarcerates at a rate even higher than the national average. The hard truth is that in Arlington, this office in the last 6 years has prosecuted over 3,200 simple marijuana possession cases. In the last 2 years, 57% of those defendants were Black. Though only 9% of the county population, Black people make up 66% of the jail population. The majority of the people in our local jail are being treated on psychotropic drugs. 16-year-olds have been detained for weeks for misdemeanors, even though their parents are able and willing to take them home. 14-year-olds with no records are charged with felonies for jiggling door handles at a county fair. And documented immigrants are charged with minor offenses with no regard about their exposure to deportation. And civil asset forfeiture is used to seize property without a conviction. This does not reflect our values of inclusion, fairness, and safety. What these policies and practices show is that while our schools and our local governments are fairly progressive, while they are a model for the Commonwealth and the country, we are lagging behind on criminal justice reform. Why is it that Charlottesville, where Chris lives, eliminated cash bail 20 years ago, but we haven't? That Prince William County and Norfolk have a mental health court, and we don't? That Fairfax and Alexandria provide electronic discovery, and we don't? That Loudoun has a restorative justice program, and we don't? We deserve a criminal justice system that reflects our values. I will work to create a 21st century system that is transparent and accountable. I will work to eliminate cash bail, to expand and create diversion programs for the youth, the mentally ill, those in the grips of addiction, and those with special needs. To identify and fill the gaps in victim and survivor care, and to support voting rights to returning citizens. My experience in the criminal justice world is deep, broad, and diverse. For the past nearly 20 years as a public defender, innocence attorney, and law professor, I've worked to identify and fix the mistakes of the criminal justice system. I've practiced at all levels, from trial to the Virginia Supreme Court. I investigate decades-old cases of the most serious crimes: rape, arson, murder. I'll use this nearly 20-year record of reform to build a transparent system that we can be proud of, that leads the nation, and that keeps us safe, without participating in mass incarceration, without criminalizing poverty, without penalizing vulnerable people, without tolerating racial disparities, and without re-traumatizing victims. I'm excited to be here tonight, and I'm excited to discuss these reforms.
Thank you so very much. Mr. Descano, you have 3 minutes as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you to the Justice Collaborative. Thank you to the Players Coalition, and Chris, thank you for coming. And I will tell you that I normally blow through the moderated times, but Chris, you are the most physically imposing moderator I've ever had, so I'll actually pay attention to them and do my best to hit these marks. But everyone, thank you. My name is Steve Descano. I am a candidate for Fairfax County Commonwealth's attorney. And when most people hear of the job of Commonwealth's attorney, they think of a prosecutor, right? The person who's in court arguing motions every day. And that is, that's my background. I was a federal prosecutor for years. I traveled all around this country doing cases at the highest level. But I've got to tell you that the Commonwealth's attorney That's not the job. The job of the Commonwealth's attorney is to be a leader, right? Is to stand in front of the dozens of prosecutors who are in court every single day and say, these are the values we're going to uphold. These are the policies and procedures we're going to use to uphold them. And if you can't hack it, the door's over there. That's what this job is, to lead with our values. And I will tell you, I've been doing that for a long time. First as a board member on NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia, as an active member of the Fairfax County NAACP, and as a founding member of the county's Police Civilian Review Panel. I have led with our values. And that's what we need in our criminal justice system, to reflect our values, right? Because our community and our criminal justice system are intimately intertwined. And I'm running because, quite frankly, in Fairfax County, we do not have that. The values that I want to bring to the office, want to make sure that we have a criminal justice system and a Commonwealth's attorney's office that is transparent and accountable to every single community. We don't have that right now. We have one that operates in a black box and is not really accountable to anyone. We need a criminal justice system that treats everybody equally, regardless of how much money you make, the color of your skin, or which part of the county you live in. We need a criminal justice system that takes a holistic approach, that instead of breaking down our communities, actually looks for solutions to build them back up and build up our communities and make us strong and united. Those are the reforms that I'm running to bring to this office. And I go around the county and I go around Northern Virginia and I tell people about this, and we get a great response. But I'm here to tell you that even though I'm the one running for this position, this race is not about me and it is not about my opponent. This race is about, are we going to live the values that we talk about every day? This race is about the type of world that we leave for our kids and our grandkids. And at bottom, this race is about getting us in Northern Virginia on the right side of history. Now, I look around and I know everybody at this table wants to be on the right side of history, and I'm looking at your faces out there and I'm guessing that you want to be on the right side of history too, and that's why you're here. Thank you very much, I appreciate that. So I'm very much looking forward to this discussion. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And if you indeed do want to be on the right side of history, I ask you, if you live in Fairfax County, come out and help us. We got 50 days left. If you live in Arlington, help Parisa. You also got 50 days left, because this is a movement. It's not about one race or two races. It is about putting us where we should be, which is on the right side of history. Thank you so much for coming.
So you talk about being on the right side of history. I mean, let's jump right in on something that we're historically bad at, which is incarcerating the citizens of America. I mean, we lead the world in that. We're among the world leaders in mass incarceration, and the negative consequences from mass incarceration have been proven to be devastating and widespread and impacting the people society incarcerates, their families and loved ones, the entire communities. It's a real burden on society at large. And the process of a person being arrested and going to jail, even briefly, it results in things that people like me who don't have to deal with the legal system generally don't think about, and that's losing your job, incurring fines, fees, debt, losing custody of your kids. Often those sent to prison enter with a general health care problem that really just gets worse, and they get no treatment, they get no drug or substance abuse help. Once you're incarcerated, the vast majority receives little of what they need, and they're released no better off, and oftentimes much worse, as you all know. So, you know, with incarceration leaving those scars that never heal, resulting in a greater likelihood of disease, depression, and even premature death, I guess that's the most important thing that I'd like to talk about tonight. And can you talk about the term, what it means to you, and if you think it's a problem, and what role have prosecutors played in growing it, and do y'all have a role in ending it, and where do you see that path?
Do you want to start with me?
Yeah, I mean, okay. we could start left to right to start off, and I'll just rotate.
That's great. Well, thank you for that question. Question, Chris. You know, right at bottom, your initial question of does mass incarceration exist? Of course it exists. I mean, you talked about it. We talked about the numbers. I mean, you have to be blind not to see that it's a problem. And when I like to think about mass incarceration, obviously you have the individuals who are in jail right now. But I actually think that that's kind of a narrow scope. You know, we have individuals who, through their interactions with the criminal justice system, they may not be sitting in a cell right now, but they're on the path to getting there. And I think that those people, if you want to take a holistic viewpoint of that, they're also, in many ways, victims of this mass incarceration machine. As to what the causes are, you know, I'm a big believer in the research of Professor John Pfaff, and a lot of that comes back to the prosecutor. The prosecutor has driven mass incarceration. I know a lot of people think about the police or the judges, but really the prosecutor is what makes this go. And we are talking about from the decisions that a prosecutor makes in particularly two areas. One, pretrial detention, right? What are we going to ask for cash bail? Are we going to try to get people in jail pretrial simply because they can't pay? That is a huge driver of incarceration in our jails. When you talk about it from the prison standpoint, the charging decisions that prosecutors make, whether a felony or misdemeanor, that really drives it, because with felony decisions, as felonies have gone up, the percentage of charges of felonies that have gone up, so has mass incarceration. And those are the crimes that get the higher sentences that are really your stock problem, which keep people in jail for a long time and grow that prison population.
So I think of over-incarceration as the process by which we over-criminalize behavior, we over-punish behavior, and we over-incarcerate our population. And I think the best way to think about this is through a sort of one piece of what the prosecutor does. And I want to just talk about plea bargaining and charging decisions and plea bargaining. So when a case comes in, the prosecutor is ultimately responsible for what charges are brought, even in Virginia where we have the magistrate system. Ultimately, it's the prosecutor that decides, are we going to charge the one thing that sort of fits this infraction precisely, or are we going to charge 12 multiple overlapping things to make the mandatory minimum, to sort of kick in some mandatory minimums, or to make the potential sentence look enormous? And I'm going to credit Buta for saying this the other day. It constrains the judge. So no matter what happens, the judge then can't deviate from the buffet that the prosecutor has put before them. So an individual is looking at this incredibly long sentence because of the way that the charges have been stacked, and they're looking at maybe 35 years for one thing that they did. That when a plea deal comes in for 3 years or 5 years or 9 months, they're going to take that plea deal because rolling the dice is just too expensive. And so that's called essentially the trial penalty. And so this is one of the things that causes mass incarceration is the stacking of charges and the leveraging of charges to get guilty pleas.
So the second question I would have in the realm of mass incarceration would be, you know, Fairfax and Arlington being relatively affluent cities, relatively safe, low numbers of violent crime. Do you think that it's a problem here specifically? Even if it's a problem elsewhere, what are the differences here than maybe other counties, and how do you tackle them? And I guess we could start with you, Prusa. Yeah.
Is this still working?
I think, yeah.
I was told I have to push every time.
Yeah, mine kept going, so we're good.
So you're right, Chris, that we are blessed in Arlington to have relatively low violent crime rate. And what we do, however, in Arlington, and one of the problems that we have is the incredible prosecution of so many simple marijuana possession charges. There are other jurisdictions in the Commonwealth where the Commonwealth's attorneys have either by policy or by practice stopped prosecuting any marijuana cases as felonies, or stopped prosecuting marijuana cases altogether. And yet in Arlington, we've prosecuted 3,200 in the last 6 years for a population of 250,000. We're told that it's because people are coming from other jurisdictions with tiny amounts of marijuana, and that to me doesn't answer it, because I don't know why we're stopping and searching people with tiny amounts of marijuana from other jurisdictions. And the racial disparities in those prosecutions are such that if you're black, you're 8 times more likely in Arlington to be charged and prosecuted for marijuana than if you're white. And looking at those stark numbers, it's willful ignorance to not try to figure out how these numbers are happening and what we can do to alleviate this problem.
Well, I think even though that you're right that Fairfax County is affluent and has a low number of violent crimes, that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have the same over-incarceration problem. Parisa mentioned marijuana. Simple possession of marijuana charges are a problem in Fairfax County as well. But to piggyback on something that she had said earlier, the first step in this mass incarceration really is the over-criminalization of crime. And what we have in Fairfax County is a huge percentage of our crime is both drug and property-related crime. And when we take a look at drug crime, the over-criminalization of individuals on drugs, right? If you take a look at what people who are addicted to drugs, who they are, they're our neighbors, but they have substance abuse issues, and that means they're ill. That doesn't mean that they're criminals, right? When we criminalize these individuals, instead of trying to divert them and get them the treatment that they desperately need, that is a failure of our criminal justice system, and that is one of the things that leads to over-incarceration and mass incarceration in Fairfax County. Very similarly, property crime is very, very similar. You know, in Virginia, the felony larceny threshold is $500, meaning if you steal over $500, you could be charged with a felony. That is an unnecessary punishment for that level of crime, right? So what we have is we have a lot of these property crimes that are low level, but give the prosecutor the ability to charge them harshly. And that helps lead to this over-incarceration problem. It really falls to the prosecutor to look at these types of crimes and figure a way to get people the help that they need and keep them out of the criminal justice system and out of jail and prison.
Well, it does sound like in the absence of a lot of other types of crimes, specifically violent crime, I mean, there is a fixation on the marijuana-related crimes here, and that's not, necessarily an anomaly among other counties or other places. I want to talk about the war on drugs. It's been completely ineffective in reducing drug use or drug sales, and it has cost taxpayers trillions of dollars over the past 4 decades. It's money that could be used to improve public safety education, health, social services programs, to say nothing of the cost to families and communities, particularly black families and communities. In Arlington and Fairfax, you mentioned that drug convictions account for about half of all convictions between 2016 and 2018. You mentioned 3,200 arrests. That's just wild for a county of that population. A lot of medical research on addiction suggests that treating drugs as a public health issue as opposed to a criminal justice issue is more effective than incarcerating. So across the country, people are kind of rapidly on this wave deciding that marijuana should either be legal or decriminalized. And in fact, multiple prosecutors in the state have pledged to stop prosecuting people for marijuana possession. Given that support for non-prosecution of marijuana and the fact that it's received so much support throughout the country and state, why do you think it hasn't been adopted here, and what would your plan be? I guess we could start with Steve.
Oh my goodness, why hasn't it? Well, I'll tell you, my plan is I will stop prosecuting simple possession of marijuana cases.
Right on.
That's period, full stop. I mean, thank you. So I didn't need 90 seconds for that part. That was easy.
Okay.
As far as why other prosecutors have not stopped, I think that there is a lack of political will and political courage from a lot of Commonwealth's attorneys. They see their role, quite frankly, as beginning and ending in the 4 walls of the courthouse. And they refuse to see themselves as public servants, as the public's representative of in the criminal justice system to bring the values of the community in. Really, all that it takes is political courage and political will. You've already mentioned that there are Commonwealth attorneys around the state who are doing this. I'm pledging to do it because I know that's the values of the county that I'll represent. Why other people don't see that, or maybe they don't feel that those are the values of their community, I can't answer to that, but I just know what Fairfax is, and I know in Fairfax County, people are yearning and crying out for the type of criminal justice reform that will not prosecute these simple marijuana possession cases because they realize that the war on drugs has been an enormous failure, and it hurts people of color. It's disproportionate to them. It doesn't keep us safe, and it also hurts our immigrant neighbors. Even if you were to go through some sort of diversion program that you have to plead guilty to before you can get into it, you can have massive immigration consequences from that. So we really need somebody who is responsive to that and has the political courage to follow through.
Got it. Yeah, definitely. Parisa?
So I want to start with the fact that in several Arlington juries, after the jurors have served, they've been polled, and repeatedly the vast majority of the jurors, that's our neighbors, say that they believe that marijuana should be legalized. Up until as late as the legislative session in 2018, the Virginia Association of Commonwealth Attorneys, which is the powerful lobby for the Commonwealth attorneys, objected to decriminalization bills that were set forth by our own delegation. And the lobby unequivocally said in 2018 that they would not support decriminalization, full stop. And this year, what they said was that they are not taking a position on it because there's dissent among the ranks. But only one Commonwealth attorney actually was in favor of decriminalization, and that was Greg Underwood in Norfolk. But I think that the reason why is that we don't have decriminalization or legalization is because prosecutors play a shell game. They tell us, I am a minister of justice, I am duty-bound, oath-bound to follow the laws, and I have no discretion. If you want a change in the law, go to the legislature and change the laws. Okay, so we do. So we elect progressive legislators, we send them down to Richmond, they propose decriminalization and legalization bills, and guess who's there to testify against those bills? It's the Virginia Association of Commonwealth Attorneys. And so they play this shell game in order to keep in their toolkit all of the tools that they desire in order to make sure that they can leverage charges against individuals.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like they're not serving the will of most people in these counties or across the state. And I'll send it right back to you, Ms. Degani-Tafti. I would say, do prosecutors have a role to play in helping to solve our drug addiction problem? Not implying through sequencing that marijuana is addictive or anything like that, but do y'all have a role to play? And why or why not? How? And what do you plan to do as Commonwealth's attorney relating to drug charges other than marijuana?
So I think of the Commonwealth's attorney role as a holistic role that involves general public safety. Right. It doesn't start and end, as Steve was saying, in the four corners of the courthouse, and it doesn't start and end with prosecuting crimes. It includes setting policies, it includes public community outreach, and ultimately it includes lobbying the legislature and doing all of these things in favor of creating a safer community. And yes, to the extent that Commonwealth attorneys have a say in what they're charging, if they're prosecuting drug offenses, they do have a responsibility to support evidence-based policies that will help create safety in our community, and drug treatment is one of those policies.
I agree 100% with Parisa. Which probably not a shock, right? But yeah, the Commonwealth Attorney's role, it is part of the job is to advocate for things that are going to improve public safety in the community. And that does not stop at the four corners, at the four walls of the courthouse. It involves building relationships with leaders at all levels, whether it's local or at the state. And pushing for policies and things that can help improve public safety. And we know that from some of the studies and the research that you cited that drug addiction is a mental health crisis, and it deserves an approach that is evidence-based and is based in mental health, and it's not something that we can prosecute our way out of. So, what I want to do is I want to take on that responsibility, work with our local leaders in Fairfax County to try to come up with with something where we can get people the help that they need if they're addicted to drugs, and if they're able to fulfill that and that program that we create to have their charges either reduced or dismissed, right? Because what we don't want is, we want two things from this. We want people to have their drug addiction under control, but we also need to realize that they have to come out on the other side with the ability to get a house, get a job, get an education. And if they're tagged with a felony record simply because they were ill, they're never going to be able to do that, and we're just driving them right back into addiction and more crime. The second thing I want to do is, I don't want to stop at the local level. I want to work with our delegates and senators in Richmond, because I talk to them all the time. And a lot of them, especially up in Northern Virginia, they realize that we need reform, particularly on this issue. But what they tell me is, Steve, we need partners. We need somebody who's going to come in as the expert and help us and tell us what we need to be doing, help us write these bills, help us advocate for this. And the fact that we don't have that means that we have a failing of our current Commonwealth attorneys, because they see their job in a way that is more limited than what the community needs it to be.
Is there one piece of reform that y'all have seen elsewhere that you're jealous of?
That's actually a great question. Only one?
Yeah,
my goodness.
As much as 90 seconds so you can get in 90 seconds. I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
Sure, no problem. The thing that jumps to mind, because it's what we were just talking about, the war on drugs. Right now, again, it goes to this point where we want people to be healthy. We want them to beat their addictions, but also to be able to come out, being able to live and support their family and being as productive as possible. And where I see in a lot of different jurisdictions around the country are actual drug courts, right? Not what we have in Fairfax County, where it's called a drug court, but it only comes into play, you only get services after you've already been found guilty and while you're on probation, right? Because that only solves half the problem. One of the great reforms that I have seen around the country is pre-plea, right? Before somebody has pled guilty or before somebody has gone to trial or been found guilty, they have the opportunity to get into a program that is going to help them with wraparound services, get the help they need, particularly medication-assisted treatment, which is the gold standard for people addicted to opioids. Get them that treatment, get them help with housing, get them to get their life back on track. And once they're able to do that, get out of the criminal justice system without a record, because that is how we help people who are sick, but also build up our community, because those people can then go and be as productive as they can possibly be and not be weighed down by a criminal history that is going to just push them back to crime and drugs.
So I would say restorative justice is the one of the reforms that I'm extraordinarily jealous of. The point of restorative justice is to repair the harm that has been caused by wrongdoing. It is victim and survivor centered, and it focuses on accountability and rehabilitation of the person who did wrong. And as I don't talk about this a lot, particularly on the campaign trail, but as a survivor of sexual abuse myself, who didn't report because I didn't want to go through the meat grinder of the court system, I would have appreciated an approach that would have helped me heal and would have helped the perpetrator of the abuse to figure out why he was doing it and to figure out how to stop and to get the appropriate treatment that he needed. And if we really care about victims and survivors, what we need to do is hear what they want and have options in our criminal justice system that are victim and survivor driven. And restorative justice is one of those things. It's a formal process. It requires buy-in from the victim and survivor, so it doesn't just happen against their will. And it requires ultimately the wrongdoer to do the really hard labor of making things right, healing the victim, and becoming the kind of person who won't do that wrong again.
Steve, you touched on the opioid crisis, talking about the pre-plea and medical assistance. It's sweeping the nation. It's really destroying a lot of families and communities. What plans do y'all have to protect the public, promote rehabilitation, and combat the crisis, if any, specifically with the opioid crisis?
Well, I think the, part of and by the way, you had mentioned earlier that Fairfax County is a affluent and low violent crime jurisdiction. But like everywhere else, we do have an opioid crisis issue. We all know that this comes for people of all income levels, all races, so it is a problem. The thing that I really, really want to push on, or the few things that I really, really want to push on, is I want to work with our local leaders to try to come up with that pre-plea disposition type of drug treatment program, right? And realize that this is an illness. It's not something we can prosecute our way out of. The other thing that I want to do is I want to build bridges down in Richmond, because I do, we have seen a very great or somewhat reduction of harm from the opioid crisis in Virginia, precisely because of Medicaid expansion, because that has allowed people who are low income to get the medication-assisted treatment that has proven to work. That costs money. And what we need to do is we need to have a Commonwealth's attorney, and I plan to be this Commonwealth's attorney in Fairfax County, who is going to build bridges down in Richmond to try to get this funding, right? Because, again, as Parisa mentioned, people do listen to their Commonwealth's attorneys down in Richmond. They have enormous power. They may sit here and tell you that they don't, but we're here to tell you that they do. So if we can actually act as a counterweight to regressive reforms and actually show a progressive view of justice, I think we'll be able to get something done. And that is essentially my plan for trying to get people the help they need around opioids.
Parisa?
I mean, I agree completely with Steve, again, shockingly. I think for me, the add-on to that would be to make sure that addiction is treated as the medical problem that it is, and not the sort of one opportunity to avoid jail and you're done. Because people relapse, and it is not a simple and easy process. You don't just do drug court once and then magically you're better. So I would want a system where we recognize that we treat it as a true medical problem, but also a system where we have the resources for juveniles to get inpatient drug treatment programs if they need to. And Arlington right now does not have a single juvenile bed for drug treatment.
Wow. That's actually shocking. So yeah, transitioning from drugs to cash bail, hot button topic to another. We're talking about people without wealth who are really just denied justice, and which of course has the biggest impact on communities of color, making it worse. Already is the stark racial disparity in the criminal justice system and how it's enforced. Cash bail effectively criminalizes poverty, leading to jail time for people who have not yet been convicted of crimes based on nothing more than failure to pay money. I think people are waking up to this. I think it's one of the, deservedly so, the biggest hot button topics we have on the docket. And we're seeing it challenged and abandoned across the country. You talked about Charlottesville. Been a while. Some places it's been just as long, most recently in Dallas. But it's still frequently used, including in Virginia. So what role, if any, do you think cash bail should play in our criminal justice system? Parisa, I could start with you because Steve got the first go-round last time.
I think that the cash bail should not be playing a role in our criminal justice system. Number one, it doesn't it penalizes people for being poor. So if you can't afford to put up, if you get cash bail of $5,000 and you can't afford to put up $5,000 or pay $500 that you're never going to get back to a bail bondsman, you sit in jail. And it's hard for me to talk about this without referring back to an incident in last June where our legislators, again, Arlington delegation, progressive, asked the incumbent Commonwealth's attorney to exercise her discretion not to seek cash bail in cases where people were not dangerous, and she called their request silly and misguided. I don't think it's silly that somebody might lose their job, that somebody might lose their apartment, that somebody might lose their kids, and that somebody might lose their car, somebody might lose their mental health, all because they can't afford to pay the money. And I don't think that, frankly, people who are dangerous should be allowed out on huge amounts of cash of bail just because they have the money to get out. We know that from data that people will show up on less restrictive means than cash bail.
We need to stop penalizing people for being poor, right? That is a baseline value, and that's what cash bail does. So to answer your specific question, I don't think cash bail should have any role in our criminal justice system because all it does is penalize poor people for being poor and put them down the path that Parisa mentioned where you can lose your job, you can lose your house, you can lose your kids, right? That's not justice. But we have a big problem with this in Fairfax County. Of the people who are eligible for a pretrial release, 45.9% of those individuals, to get out, they have to pay, meaning they have cash bail. Our current Commonwealth's attorney, I've heard him say this. He says, this is an equal protection problem. It is a problem. And yet, in the next breath, he will say, and about 30%, I think about 30% of the people who are arrested are sitting in jail because they can't afford bail. And he shrugs his shoulders, right? That is a failure of leadership, right? That's where we talk about political courage, political will to do something. I'm going to do something about it because I'm never going to ask for cash bail. But we need to realize that ending cash bail is not an event, it's a process. Because when you end cash bail, what that does is we get down to put even more reliance on pretrial assessment tools, right? And those are supposed to be race neutral. They aren't 100% race neutral. We need to keep pushing on those. And I plan to actually, when I'm advocating down in Richmond, to push on the agency to continue to collect data, to work those so that they continue to be race neutral, right? We're never going to punish people for being poor, but we have to make sure that we continue to work so that we do things that are the most just way. And that's step one, getting rid of cash bail. Step two, continuing the push on the pretrial risk assessment tools.
I mean, it's a completely un-American process when it comes to like American ideals, quote unquote. You know, you talked about, Parisa, you talked about putting a price on public safety effectively by, you know, truly dangerous folks. You know, there is a cost they can get out, but people who are just poor can't get out because they can't afford it. And, you know, you guys, I know there's a lot of static coming from some of your peers on this topic. What do you think is the holdup, and how do you change their minds? I mean, conceptually, I mean, it might be a rhetorical question because they're not going to change their minds, but how do you convince people who are, and who's holding it up? You know, is it the bail bonds industry? Is it just ideology?
Well, I think it's probably a lot of those things working together. I mean, if you go into the Fairfax County Courthouse, you go to the front step, you turn around 180 degrees, the first thing you see across the street is a giant bail bondsman sign, right? Yep. And if you go within a couple of blocks, you're going to see a dozen of them. And if you go into 2J and you watch these bail hearings, the only people in there are a whole bunch of bail bonds people looking to make money off of the backs of poor people. You know, so there's that institutional problem. On the other hand, you just have a lot of Commonwealth's attorneys who are stuck in their ways. A lot of them that will just shrug their shoulders and say, well, this is the way that the job was when I got it, and I don't even really thought about it. And not only on cash bail, but on a number of things. We see that in Fairfax County. Again, a big part of this is political will. And that is actually what is so great about forums like this and people actually getting tuned in to criminal justice reform, is that people are starting to wake up to the idea that the criminal justice system is supposed to be reflective of the values of the community it's meant to serve. And I think in a lot of these communities, we have values that are not un-American in that way, don't want people to be punished for being poor. And Commonwealth's attorneys, they've flown under the radar for so long. They've never been held accountable in this way. So I think a large part of it is the political will. And forums like this and people like you guys who are interested in this demanding that your Commonwealth's attorneys reflect your values. And if they don't, then they need to be voted out. Because really that is the holdup, this old school way of thinking, and them not being afraid for their jobs if they do the wrong thing.
I mean, I agree with Steve. I think of it as a lack of imagination. And without casting aspersions on anybody's good faith or not, I think that if you've spent decades doing the same job and doing it in the same way, it's really hard to imagine something different. And the fact that we are now, as a group, as a country, trying to imagine something different means that we are on the cusp of really changing our nation and shaping the next generation in a way that is better than what we shaped, than the war on drugs. And if you think about sort of lack of imagination and entrenchment, there's a reason why, if anyone's familiar with the military and the JAG Corps, there's a reason why in the JAG Corps you are not permitted to only be a prosecutor and you are not permitted only to be a defense attorney. You have to switch back and forth. And the reason why they do that is so that people do not become entrenched in a position.
So you guys talked about really various factors, but if you had one way to snap your fingers and reform the local system of pretrial detention, what would it be?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
If
question?
you had one way to just snap your fingers and reform the local system of pretrial detention, I mean here, how would you change it? Besides just completely just obliterate it.
That's my answer, man. You anticipated, yeah.
So, I mean, it's actually not pie in the sky to presume, to adopt a presumption of release unless somebody is demonstrated to be dangerous or an actual flight risk. Not meaning they won't show up for court, but an actual flight risk, like fleeing the jurisdiction. Adopt technology. I mean, we're living in the 21st century. Our dentists give us automatic text message reminders. Why can't the court, pretrial services, have a program that gives automatic text messaging reminders? We have apps that allow people to check in with their supervisors. Why are we not? I mean, these apps cost literally just a few dollars, as opposed to $182 a night for somebody to sit in jail. So, I mean, you don't need to snap your fingers. You just need to look in your own backyard. We have the CEO of the Pretrial Justice Institute living in Arlington. It's not hard.
Gotcha. Well, that's good news. So there's some good news here. Steve?
No, that's 100% right. I mean, it is not pie in the sky at all. I mean, you really, if you just set a policy with a presumption of release and work from there, you are going to get to all the places that Parisa just mentioned. The fact that I am struggling to fill 90 seconds on this answer, right? It really just shows not only how easy it could be, but just how entrenched and unmotivated and unresponsive the Commonwealth's attorneys in jurisdictions that don't have that presumption have been. And I think that is it's unfortunate. It's more than unfortunate. It's terrible. And again, that's why I'm so happy that there are so many people getting involved with this, because this really is something that we can do very, very quickly once new leadership comes into these offices.
And can I, since this is a conversation, can I just add to that jurisdiction after jurisdiction that has adopted these reforms has seen, in fact, better court appearance rates than they had before. And they're, with no effect on recidivism, no effect on people committing additional crimes while they're out, and again, no effect on people not showing up.
Yeah. Well, it is a conversation. It's certainly not a debate. You guys agree on a lot, which can be good. I want to talk about diversion. Diversion policies, of course, reduce recidivism by addressing root causes of crime, providing incentives to remain offense-free, all while allowing individuals to avoid criminal charges, conviction, and sentences. And endless research has shown that communities are safer when prosecutors implement diversion in a manner that minimizes court involvement and unnecessary incarceration and all the collateral damages that we've talked about ad nauseum. So diversion programs are also shown to dramatically reduce reoffending. And so first, my question would be, what's your view on diversion as it exists in your jurisdiction, and how would you specifically change your jurisdiction's approach to diversion, if at all? I guess, Steve, it's your turn to go first.
Sure, that's a great question. I'm really glad he asked it, because diversion is something that is very, very important to me, because it's a great way to end mass incarceration, right, and get people the help that they need and build up our community. I've already talked a little bit about the drug courts in Fairfax County and why they are not as advertised and how they need to be changed. Another thing that we have in Fairfax County that could be a great resource that is not being used at all is our Veterans Treatment Docket. And this is a docket that is meant to help, is aimed at helping veterans who have gotten into some level of trouble or have drug dependency or some mix of those things. And it's actually very, very personal to me. I'm a veteran, and we have a great opportunity in Fairfax County because we have approximately 70,000 veterans. But the way that it works is it's a court, it gives you wraparound services, but your Commonwealth's attorney is the gatekeeper, right? It's a voluntary program in a lot of ways. You have to incentivize people to get into the program if you're the Commonwealth's attorney. And our Commonwealth's attorney does not do that. That's the reason his failure to incentivize people to get into these programs is the reason why there's less than a dozen people in that program today. The way that it works is you're supposed to, or the way that I want to do it is I want to incentivize people. I want to offer them reasons to come into this program instead of taking a plea, doing the hard work of getting to the root causes. And in a lot of those cases, that's going to be a better plea, or even the possibility of getting rid of their charges if they complete a program. But we don't have that right now. Our Commonwealth's attorneys offer them the same exact plea, doesn't incentivize anybody to come into the program. And what it does is we have this great evidence-based program that is wasted, not because it doesn't exist, but because the leader of our criminal justice system and the Commonwealth's attorney refuses to engage with that program because it does not match his view of what justice is. Again, that is a thing that we have. All it's going to take is new leadership in that office to really make it useful.
I mean, that's the same situation in Arlington. Our drug court serves 12 people right now. And 11, because one person graduated. But in its existence, it hasn't even served 100. And if you walked around the perimeter of the courthouse, you would find more than 11 people with drug addiction issues. And the gatekeeper, as Steve said, is the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. They set the criteria, and they set it so restrictively that very few people qualify. And they have veto power, so they can say no even to somebody who is otherwise qualified to participate. So we, again, in Arlington have the infrastructure, but we're just not using it. I also think that what Steve said about incentivizing is right. People need a reason to participate and a goal and a benefit. And doing a drug program when it's going to end, when the conviction is going to end up on your record, or doing restorative justice when the conviction is still going to end up on your record, isn't a great incentive. So what we really need to be doing is what other jurisdictions do, which is make sure that the charges are dropped after the successful completion. And I mean, that is a motivator. That you're going to come out of this with a clean record if you do all of the things that you're supposed to do. That is an extremely strong motivator.
I want to remind y'all real quickly to get in your questions if you have them, as we're hitting probably past the halfway point. So, next question would be: when is it appropriate to just say, I'm not going to prosecute this case? I mean, what types of cases are you just saying, to heck with it, I'm not dealing with this. This is not important enough.
So I think that actually depends on the jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. If a jurisdiction is only bringing in 40 people a year on simple marijuana possession charges, for example, it may not make sense for the Commonwealth's attorney in that jurisdiction to say, or if it's doing it in a way that's not disproportionate to other people. That Commonwealth's attorney may want to say, look, we're not going to do it. In Arlington, when you have out of whack numbers like we do, mm-hmm. and when you are yards away from a jurisdiction where marijuana is legal, I think that is an appropriate situation to say, we are not going to prosecute simple marijuana possession, given that it's legal across the river, given the wave of legalization, and given the disproportionate impact that it has on people of color, regardless of whether they're Arlingtonians or not.
Where do you draw that line where you get, you're right over the river from D.C., but then there's counties a few counties away, and I know it isn't your jurisdiction. I want to make you think for other prosecutors, but, at some point, is it kind of like, hey, listen, I don't care if it's 3 counties, 4 counties up the road, we've decided that this isn't a danger and we're wasting time and money.
I mean, I think that as Greg Underwood has in Norfolk, I think that happens to be a legitimate position as well, that these prosecutions waste money. We don't have infinite resources, and at the end of the day, they make us less safe rather than more safe because of the collateral consequences that are imposed on the people who are convicted of these crimes, and the generations really of poverty that it creates.
Right, yeah. I mean, legal in our nation's capital. So, I would say, I want to give Steve an opportunity to answer that same question first.
Thank you. I think kind of that test that you just put out there is kind of the right test, right? Is something a danger? Are we wasting resources here prosecuting this case? And also a real reckoning with what is the purpose of our criminal justice system, right? Is it rehabilitation? Is it punishment? It's not punishment, right? Is it to be retributed to hurt people, right? And if that's not what the purpose of our criminal justice system is, we need to look at the charges that we're bringing and see, are we making a positive difference in our community? Are we using our resources wisely? And I think, what we've been talking about, marijuana, I mean, that's very, very clear. And, Fairfax County, of course, we're right by the river, but if we were 100 miles down the road, I would still think that is a crime, that waste money is not an issue, a safety issue, and punishing that crime does not fit in with what our justice system should be. And that's one of the reasons why I'm never going to bring one of those types of cases. The other thing that I want to do when I get into the office as Commonwealth's attorney is I want to look at every single charge and think about those questions. Because part of the problem that I have right now in our Commonwealth's attorney's office is that it operates in a black box. Right? We have no data on anything that happens there from the outside. So it is this opaque monster that we really need to get into. And that's why I want to invite outside organizations to come in and take a look at our data, where we're having disparities, where we're having discrepancies, where we're wasting resources. And once we're able to get at that data, then we'll be able to really answer the questions of, are we wasting time? Are we wasting money? What is the outcome here?
Yeah, how do you do that? I mean, how do you audit your own kind of setup you have in your jurisdiction, for lack of a better term? I mean, do you have somebody come in and kind of tell you where your blind spots are?
To my mind, I think that's exactly what you do. This audit needs to be independent, right? And there are organizations right now who are ready, willing, and able to come in and take a look at that, often for no cost. And I think it's very, very important that it be somebody that's independent, right? Because really we are, I'm running for this office. I want to change the criminal justice system, but really what I want to do, part of that is I want to change the culture of the office. Right, that is very, very important here. We need to change the culture of the office. If we don't change the culture of the office, we can't change our system. So I can't necessarily rely on the people who are a part of that culture, right, to come in and do the auditing. Not because they're bad people, but because that's just their history and that's what they know. So it's very, very important to me that somebody outside, new eyes, come in and help me audit that. And that's actually one of the first things that I plan to do when I'm Commonwealth's attorney.
I've already gotten a commitment from folks at some of these organizations to come in and use Bureau of Justice Assistance grants to audit the office and to make recommendations going forward about best practices that are tailored to our jurisdiction.
So across the nation, data reveals it. There's a substantial and well-documented disparity in the impact of police and prosecutorial practices on communities of color. Disparate enforcement and prosecution of the law is not only unfair to the specific individuals impacted, it also undermines the relationship between the police, the prosecutor, and members of those communities. We talk about in Fairfax County, for example, African Americans make up 38.6% of the jail population. and 48% of the marijuana possession convictions, while only accounting for 10% of the population. And the numbers are even worse in Arlington, where African Americans make up 66.1% of the jail population, 58% of the marijuana possession convictions, but only account for 8.8% of the county population. What do you attribute that disparity to? This is a rhetorical question. Is it a real problem? And does it undermine community safety?
I think that ultimately it does undermine community safety because it undermines people's faith in the police department. It undermines people's faith in the criminal justice system, and the collateral consequences are carried around by the people who are convicted for years, their entire lives, and it shuts them out of the primary job market. It makes them unable to receive Pell Grants and other federal financial aid for school. It makes them unable to receive federal housing assistance, as well as other reentry programs. So I think that there is a negative public safety consequence to all of these. We need the data to figure out why this is happening. I mean, we've gotten some explanations, and my opponent's given some interesting explanations. But I'm interested in looking at the data and seeing what really is happening and where the decisions are being made that are causing the disparate impact.
What's your opponent's worst argument that you can think of?
I mean, I feel like everybody can look up the Arlington Dems debate on their own. I want to stay positive.
Yeah, I got you.
It's
There's
out
just so
there
many
in the
bad
world.
ones out there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear. I mean, I would just send that one over to you, Steve. I mean, it's obviously a problem. Does it undermine community safety? And what do you attribute that disparity to?
Well, I think it absolutely undermines community safety. I mean, people need to trust in their criminal justice system, whether it be police, prosecutors, or judges, because at the end of the day, the system is not this separate thing. It's part of our community, and it should be responsive to the community. As a matter of fact, it's set up to serve the community. And I think there are a number of different issues. To Paris's point, we need a lot of data to really make a dent at this, because I think some of this comes from the prosecutor's position. I mean, you're probably I anticipate that when I get some of this data, we're going to see plea changes in probation recommendations, plea recommendations, sentencing recommendations, the way that things are charged. And that's a problem. That can be fixed in the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office once we have the data. The second part of this, you mentioned the police. And this is near and dear to my heart as a member of the County Police Civilian Review Panel, because I've gone all around Fairfax County and talked to people about the way they're policed. And it's obvious, and people see that, and they tell me all the time, different communities are policed in different ways. And that's an issue. And that is actually something that, again, the Commonwealth's attorney, if they don't think that their job is simply within the four walls of the court, can actually make a difference. Because a lot of people don't realize that the police answer to the County Board of Supervisors, and the County Board of Supervisors are elected officials. So that means that the police ultimately answer to the people. And part of building those relationships with local government and seeing myself as the representative of the people in the criminal justice system, that means that I have a responsibility to go and advocate to the Board of Supervisors for police changes that would try to get rid of the fact that different communities are policed differently.
So, I mean, you guys have both mentioned, well, you mentioned police. I mean, obviously, prosecutors play a big role, but is part of the problem, and you can't help but see situations like this all the time on the news, on the internet, going viral, where it seems like police are involved in an interaction that is totally unnecessary, and there's conflict that stems from it. And I feel like, sometimes you're asking police to do too much. Are we asking police to do too much, like manage mentally ill people? What do you do to make sure that police are not being used to try to deal with problems that they're not equipped to handle? They're not experts in every field. We're putting too much on them. No,
that's a great point, and I think that's very, very valid. I mean, you ask You know, in a lot of ways, anytime there's a problem in our society, the first person that gets called are the police, regardless of what that problem is. And in a lot of ways, we're asking police to do things that they're not trained or equipped to do. And I think part of that is building relationships with other government officials at all different levels to try to get the resources to get other people who are equipped to handle those problems out there in the community, funding those positions to handle these issues. Because again, it's going to take someone who comes at it from a subject matter expert, which I think the Commonwealth's attorney is viewed by a lot of elected officials as a subject matter expert in this, to really push and advocate for this. It's not outside of the realm of the Commonwealth's attorney to say, hey, to lower crime and to help people, we need more social workers. We need more drug counselors. We need more of this and we need more of that, because quite frankly, you're right. We do need people who are better equipped than police to handle a lot of the issues that police are called out to that result in some of the terrible, terrible interactions that we all see on the news every day.
I mean, I've for those of you who've been to meet and greets with me, you've heard me say that we ask our police to do too much, and we. I mean, Arlington has a well-educated and well-trained police department. They're trying to get everybody trained in crisis team management, but at the end of the day, police may not be the best people, period, to be handling a mentally ill person who's in the middle of a crisis, and we shouldn't be asking them to, but we should also be giving them de-escalation training and better training. Another way in which we ask the police to do too much is our student resource officers. We have taken what used to be disciplinary problems that were handled by the school administration, and we've now made it a police problem. And that's just unfair to the police, because they're in a position where now everything gets referred to them and becomes a criminal matter because it's referred to them.
That's a great point. And we've seen, it seems like video after video of students being involved in really bad situations with police officers. And, I guess one last question before we turn it over to y'all's questions, which I have here on these index cards, and they look awesome. Across the country, we see people, disproportionately black men, who are often unarmed, shot and killed by the police. We also know from studies that racial profiling is real. How do you hold police accountable and also maintain a good working relationship with them? I guess, Parisa, you could start.
So the work that I do now requires that I build relationships with people who don't necessarily trust me. Including prosecutors, including police officers. And so one of my skills is creating relationships with people. I mean, even including defense attorneys, frankly, because nobody likes when I start poking around to see what they did wrong. The work I do does not make me beloved amongst anybody. But this is also a really personal issue for me. I don't think anybody should ever be above the law. And it's a personal issue for me because if you look at my son, and you look at my husband, and you look at my daughter, they're black. And I want what every single person in Arlington County, the City of Falls Church, and Fairfax, and everywhere across the country wants: to be able to send my kids to school, to be able to send my kids to birthday parties, to have them be able to walk to 7-Eleven without worrying that they're going to be treated unfairly, without worrying that they're going to be unsafe. And, I think holding people accountable, public officials, individuals, police, is important to us.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, no one is above the law. I think that is your baseline value here. Unfortunately, we have a history of sometimes people being above the law, and that's a huge issue. And I will tell you that I have friends and family members who are law enforcement officials, And I believe that law enforcement officials want to do the right thing. Most law enforcement officials want to do the right thing. They want to protect and serve, right? I think that is the reason why most of these individuals, or all these individuals, get into this line of work. But just because that's the intent for most individuals, that doesn't mean that we don't hold people accountable. I think that the way that you hold people accountable while still being able to build a good working relationship with law enforcement is to be an honest broker and to build trust in ways big and small, both with the community and the law enforcement, and to do what you say you're going to do and walk the walk. Not only just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And what that means is, if there is an issue and a police officer needs to be held accountable, that means that you do it. You do it efficiently, you do it effectively, and you do it transparently. You show the community that they can trust in their criminal justice system, and you show the police that I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do, which is be the representative of the community and hold up our values in the criminal justice system. And I think that they'll respect that because, again, my friends and family that are law enforcement officials, they also have a vested interest in having the community trust them. Because if the community doesn't trust all cops, it just makes it makes life dangerous for everyone. So I actually think that we can build a relationship while holding bad apples accountable, because I think that benefits to the community and actually benefits to the police officers who will still be working their beat when this other individual is held accountable.
I'm going to pivot. Thank you, guys. I'm going to pivot and hear from y'all. We have the index cards, like I mentioned, the same format, 90 seconds. And one right off the bat here, I'll read it. What role do you believe implicit bias plays in police department policies, and how do you intend to address and disrupt such biases? And I mean, we're talking about it. It seems repetitive, but you guys talk about accountability. I think some of these biases can't be fixed with just setting a standard. I'm sure you guys have specific strategies to kind of eliminating some of these biases in training and elsewhere. Do you have any that are in the forefront of your mind?
I think that's right. I think that's right. We have when we have implicit bias or we have systemic discrimination, we're not going to fix it accidentally. We need to take a systemic approach. I only got 90 seconds. I will say that I always carry this around. This is, Teresa laughs, I do this all the time. This is my plan for reform. It's called Progressive Justice. It's on my website. It's 20 pages, 80 footnotes. This is how I think that we are going to, it's not that funny. I think this is how we're going to help end implicit bias, or get around implicit bias and systemic discrimination. And what we need to do is we need to get past the point of, well, that person meant well, or this isn't what we meant, and actually take a hard look at the data and figure out what the actual outcomes are and build policies around the hard data that we have. Because, I don't necessarily think that a lot of problems that we have are because we have people who are racist or classist who are out there in the courtroom and on the street. It's just, in a lot of ways, the way that the system is set up. So that's why we need the data, because we need to take a systemic approach. That's the only way that we're going to fix a systemic problem and implicit bias.
The first thing we need to do is collect data. The first thing we need to do is collect data. The second thing we need to do is stop thinking that when the data tells a story of implicit bias, that we're accusing the community and we're accusing the police and we're accusing the prosecutor's office of being racist and bigoted. Because what we have in this country is institutional racism, and the practices and policies that create institutional racism don't depend on conscious individual prejudice. They don't depend on conscious individual bias. They don't depend on somebody being an overt racist. So we need to start having those conversations before we can get to resolving the actual problems, and acknowledge that the data is out there, collect it, and that institutional racism is a thing, and that then we can start talking about solving it. But as long as we're casting aspersions and calling people racist, it's never going to happen.
I have two here that are How do you, I have two here that are pretty much the same, and I'll make them into one, but how do you feel about the restoration of rights for the formerly incarcerated, and then do prosecutors have a responsibility to help currently and formerly incarcerated people? What can they do?
So generally, I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
So generally, is there a lot you can do for currently or formerly incarcerated people?
I mean, the role of the Commonwealth's attorney tends to be more front end than back end, but you know, the what I call the morality pulpit piece of the job can actually do something to increase services available to and training programs available to people who are incarcerated, as well as reentry programs available to people who are recently released. And the justification for doing that is because ultimately making sure that people have resources and training and jobs actually makes our community safer in the long run.
Yeah, I agree, and I think
I agree, and I think you know, it's interesting.
We both were endorsed by
Parisa and I, as we sit here, we both were endorsed by Governor Terry McAuliffe, specifically around, or we got our foot in the door around that restoration of rights piece, because both of our opponents took Terry to court to try to get him to stop giving rights back to people who paid their debts to society. That's right. I see some head shaking in there, and that's right that your head would shake at that. Because really what we want, again, if we take a look at what we want our criminal justice system to be, what we want is we want individuals to come out, if they're in at all, but come back as fully functioning members of our society and welcome back to our community, right? Because that is what helps break the cycle of decreased opportunity, increased poverty that leads to increased crime, welcoming people back. You know, and I've seen that firsthand. I actually went door to door and registered individuals to vote who were formerly incarcerated. And the joy that I saw on people's face and relief when they realized that they could get their voting rights back, this idea that they had been welcomed back to this community, it was like a weight was lifted off of them. It was amazing to intrude on these people at their house with a door knock and have them actually be so happy to see me because you know, they were getting this great thing back. And furthermore, to Parisa's point, these are bully pulpit positions. Again, let's not forget this. This does not end and begin in the four walls of the courthouse. The job of the Commonwealth's attorney is to advocate statewide in a lot of ways for what our values are, what we want out of the criminal justice system. So part of that, specifically on the restoration of rights question, is arguing with our delegates and our senators to get them to push so that rights are restored automatically. Because again, from a public safety point of view, that is a smart thing to do, and that would fall in the purview of the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office.
So, yep.
Thank you. You're too kind.
I don't want to cut off the applause.
Yeah, it doesn't happen all that much. Yeah.
So, do you support the practice of prosecuting drug crimes by having police solicit drug sales from people not otherwise seeking to sell drugs to them? This was a great question. Is there any question? Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, when we are talking about what we want out of our criminal justice system, we want our system to keep us safe and to not waste our resources. You know, in a lot of those types of cases, what we're doing is we're wasting resources on people that are not a danger to our community. I take a look at that, and I think that is in many times and in many ways, without getting into the very, very specifics of it, but just as the way that question was asked, a waste of our resources that could be used to actually helping people with programs, with drug addiction, with other things that would make our community safer. I don't think setting up entrapment scenarios to get people who would not otherwise commit criminal acts to get them into our justice system is smart. It is an old school tough on crime approach to crime, but it's not a smart on crime approach that we need to build a 21st century criminal justice system.
So I feel like this is referring to a specific case. I think it's one thing to do a drug buy, and to confirm that somebody is sort of repeatedly selling. It's another thing to entice people who otherwise wouldn't be selling, and to sort of keep at them and keep saying, well, I'll give you $500 if you get me this. No, I'll give you $700. I'll give you $800. I'll give you $1,500. And this is actually a case that happened in Arlington a little while back. I think enticement of that sort it casts the net and really brings people who shouldn't be in the criminal justice system into the criminal justice system, and it's a huge waste of money.
Some legislators want to amend the felony murder rule to include providing drugs which lead to overdoses and death. Support or oppose?
Do you mind if I go first? Okay.
Do you mind if I go first? Okay. I oppose that. I think that's crazy. What we need to do when we take a look at our individuals who are using drugs or are drug addicted, the primary goal is to remember that they are our neighbors, right, and they are sick, and to keep them alive and to help them.
Criminalizing that in that way.
Criminalizing that in that way.
It makes it more likely that people are going to die.
It makes it more likely that people are going to die. And that's what we don't have, right? Because if you think that, we know that a lot of times when people overdose or what have you, it's because friends or family are getting together and using together, right? There's not this incredible distinction between Scarface who's selling these tainted drugs to somebody on the street. But if we start to prosecute people in that way, what you'll see is family members or friends who will realize and think about that, and instead of calling 911, will get out of there because they're worried about their future, and that is going to lead to more of our neighbors dying. And if our goal really is to keep people alive, to get them treatment, and to bring them back as members of our community, we have to give people every opportunity to get people who are sick help. And these types of prosecutions do the exact opposite of it. Again, that is a tough on crime approach that has not worked and will not work. All it will do is lead to more death and destruction.
I oppose it, and I think that if the goal is to increase drug overdose deaths, this is the way to achieve that goal.
Well, that was concise. To piggyback on that question, because this is interesting to me, what do y'all think about safe injection sites? They're being adopted elsewhere. It's a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum, but
it is the data that is being produced by the data that we're seeing is that it is helpful and it does make the community safer. I don't have a whole lot to say other than we should be following evidence-based practices, even if they seem, sort of out of the ordinary and out of the box and not what we're accustomed to, because we want to be smart.
I think it's important that we. That what we do, again, we're talking about data. We're talking about things that will.
That what we do, again, we're talking about data. We're talking about things that will actually work. And a lot of jurisdictions are different. And I will say that I don't know how a safe injection site would work in Fairfax County, and I'll tell you why. You take a look at where safe injection sites have really worked. You take a look at cities like Vancouver or Lima or other cities in Europe. And what you will see is you will see very, very dense cities. A lot of them are less than 40 square miles in size. Not only are they less than 40 square miles in size, but they have great transportation networks to get people to the safe injection sites. Fairfax County, by contrast, is over 400 square miles, and it does not have a great public transportation system. As a matter of fact, the only transportation system that the county has is really to get people to D.C. So I worry, or I would want to get more data and work with experts to see if a solution that has worked, and by the way, it has worked, the data on that is irrefutable, that has worked in smaller metro areas with great transportation systems, if that would work in a large suburban sprawling jurisdiction like Fairfax County. Because if it wouldn't, then what we would need to do is we would need to come up with another approach that would work for that type of jurisdiction. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to solve the problem and keep people alive, but we need to make sure that the solutions that we bring actually fit the jurisdictions where they're being implemented.
not going to read this question in its entirety, but this it says, this area has a lot to learn from Chris's NFL hometown of Philadelphia. One is how to play better football.
Devastating.
Oh man! And then there's 18 other lines, but there's some good questions in here. But I mean, it's essentially, Krasner's made a lot of waves. He's been fairly out in front of things, and he's been talked about a lot. Is there anything that you really like that he's doing? Is there anything that you can take down here from up in Philly specifically? It sounds like a biased question a little bit.
All of it.
All of it.
I mean, all of it.
All of it.
No, I'm a huge fan of Krasner.
No, I'm a huge fan of Krasner. As a matter of fact, I went to law school at Temple in Philadelphia, and my first internship was at the Philly DA's office back in the bad old days when Lynn Abraham was the DA, the deadliest DA in the country. But what Krasner's doing is fantastic, and there's a lot of policies that can really make a big difference that I would want to take down to Fairfax. We're talking about bail reform. That's something that he's really led on. A very specific policy. Another one is the fact that he has his prosecutors read into the record the cost of incarceration, right? Because again, we keep going back to, and we talked about it a couple of times, are we using our resources smartly? And really, what do we want? And just the simple act of calculating what it's going to cost to carry out a sentence that you asked for is going to put in the prosecutor's mind this idea of, is this thing really what we should be doing? So that is another policy that I think coming down from that office would fit really, really well in Fairfax County. And there are others, but I see the final question sign right there and the 90 seconds. But there's a lot. He's doing great work.
Just to lay out the data on the bail, he stopped asking for bail, I think, on 23 different charges, and what they saw was a 22% reduction of the jail population, but they have the best court appearance rate that they've had in 10 years. And again, the data shows from Philadelphia that there has been no negative impact in terms of people committing additional crimes while they're out or people failing to show up. One of the things that DA Krasner has done that's near and dear to my heart is create a conviction integrity unit, and to review cases of where people are claiming innocence. And Virginia is such a black box in terms of what you can get what information you can get even pre-trial, let alone what you can get post-conviction. That it's really important that we have somebody in office in every jurisdiction who is willing to look at cases where people are claiming innocence and go back and really do an investigation. And I've worked with prosecutors across multiple jurisdictions where we've investigated cases. In one jurisdiction, we investigated cases together, and it can be a partnership. It can be, with nonprofits. It can be a partnership between jurisdictions. It can take a lot of different forms. But what I would like to do is follow his lead in creating a conviction integrity unit.
Not to extend the last question too much, but this is interesting. So, what's the threshold for following a lead like that? I mean, you probably have a whole host of people, incarcerated people, claiming innocence. Is it an inexact science? Is there a prerequisite that needs to be met?
I mean, I think that you have to look at a case and see. You have to look at a case and see. Is there potential that this is a bad conviction? Is there potential proof of innocence? And then do the hard work of investigating the case to see, what that evidence is. And usually there's clues. You don't just get a case and hundreds of people ask for their cases to be reviewed a year, and you get good after a while of figuring out which cases have indicia of potentially being wrongful convictions and which cases have legs. And more often than not, when I am invited into a prosecutor's office to review a file, I close a case. But there are specific things that one can look for, and investigative leads that one can pursue, and usually those are fairly apparent in the file.
Gotcha.
Cool.
I would now like to say that your index cards were awesome, but I can't read anymore. So with that, we will conclude the discussion with y'all, but I would first like to give each candidate a 3-minute closing. Did we have 90 seconds or 3 minutes? 3 minutes. You guys get 3 minutes once more to close, and then we will close out.
Yeah, you can go left to right. I'm not gonna take all 3 minutes.
Yeah, you can go left to right.
Okay. I'm not gonna take all 3 minutes.
You're the boss, man. You guys are prosecutors.
I'll tell you
I'm
what,
over here.
that is,
I'm not gonna tell you what to do.
I'll tell you what. That is
the nicest thing a professional athlete.
that is the nicest thing a professional athlete has ever said to me. It's legitimately the only.
If you come visit me at work, you know, like I'll tell you what to do, but not up here.
That's right.
I just read the questions.
Yeah. But you know, in closing, I want to say, first of all, Chris, thank you for being here, and thank each and every one of you for being here and caring. Because for far too long, this has been something that people have not cared about. And we are very, very fortunate in Northern Virginia to try to be in the vanguard of this. You know, not only in the country, but particularly in the Commonwealth. We have a real opportunity here in Northern Virginia, not only to build a better criminal justice system and therefore stronger communities for where we live, but we have that opportunity to serve as a beacon for the rest of the communities in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think that's something that we should not take lightly. You know, I look around and I see a lot of people who I know are attorneys, and they come at this from the perspective of being in court every day. But for those of you who aren't attorneys, and for all the people who might be watching at some point who are not attorneys, you don't need to be an attorney to realize how important this is. Because again, this is a question of values, right? We want everyone to think in their hearts, is it okay that we have a criminal justice system that is opaque and is not responsive? Is it okay that we have a criminal justice system that treats people differently just because of who they are? And is it okay that we have a criminal justice system that punishes people unnecessarily and breaks down our communities and leads to more crime and leads to more desperation and leads to the ruining of communities and families? Because really that is the stark question that this race is about. And I think that when you look at it that way, and again, you don't need to be an attorney to look at it that way. You just have to be a caring person, someone who cares about others in their community. And I think when you look at that, it becomes very, very clear that we need reform. We need reform in our criminal justice system. Because I know in Fairfax County we have this great idea of what we want to be. And we follow our values in a lot of those areas. And we follow our values in a lot of those areas. But our criminal justice system and our county are so intertwined that if we are not following the values in our criminal justice system, we are working at cross purposes, and we will never get to where we want to go as a community. So I ask each and every one of you, I think you've already looked in your hearts, and I think you want that reform. Tell your friends, ask them these questions, because I think when you do, you will see the light go off in their head that things need to change and that they will get engaged, and I hope that you get engaged. We have 50 days left. So please, if you live in Fairfax, go to my website, stevedescano.com. I'd love to see you help us get through the finish line in these next 50 days.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you again, Chris. I tried really hard to come up with a football reference and a joke. And
They're usually not good. I wouldn't even bother.
well, they're especially not good if you don't watch football.
You're not missing much.
And my husband, he always keeps it real.
Yep.
And he said, "Babe, you can't do that. You're not going to get away with it." But he, however, is a fan of yours, and he knows what a big deal you are. And he convinced me not to embarrass myself or you in that way. I am very grateful for this forum. I think forums like these are necessary for democracy, and I think the fact that you all are here on this beautiful spring evening is indicia that you are going to be shaping our community, and you are going to be the leaders in our community. It's really exciting to have reached a point in this country and in Arlington, and even sort of where a broad swath of society agrees that our criminal legal system is in dire need for reform. And everybody who isn't entrenched in the system, everybody whose personal identity isn't tied up with the system as it exists, understands that we need this reform. If you're an economic conservative, you understand that we're wasting money criminalizing things that have nothing to do with public safety. If you're a libertarian, you know that the pendulum has swung too far in using criminal laws to encroach on civil and economic liberty. If you're a person of faith, you understand that we've completely moved from our criminal law any concept of redemption or giving people a second chance. If you're a victim advocate, you know that far too often the system does nothing to truly care for victims and to help them rebuild their lives. And if you're like me and you're a progressive, you know that it's not right that the criminal legal system penalizes people because they are poor or because they're black or people of color. So this is why I'm running. Reforming the criminal justice system is one of the human rights challenges of our time. It's going to define the next generation, just as the war on drugs has defined ours. And reform isn't going to happen unless it's done locally, right here, starting today. We're better than the system that we have. We deserve better than the system that we have. And come June 11th, I hope that you will help me create the system that we deserve.
So with that, we actually conclude the discussion, and I want to thank so much, thank y'all so much for your attention, and I want to thank the candidates so much. Steve, Parisa, you guys are awesome. Appreciate you, and thanks for answering all the questions. Go engage people and get them interested in this stuff, because as the candidates mentioned, this stuff will define future generations. And we are literally watching it unfold right in front of our eyes. So this message is not so much for the people in this room. You already get it. You're here. Go engage people. Go bring people with you. And most importantly, be sure to vote June 11th. So thank you very much for your time and your attention.